In the heart of a peaceful suburban neighborhood on a crisp autumn morning, a routine traffic stop would become a defining moment that challenged deep-rooted prejudices and transformed lives forever. The sun had barely risen when a distinguished federal judge, known for his 20 years of unwavering dedication to justice, pulled out of his driveway in his pristine black Mercedes sedan. Little did he know that his usual 15-minute commute to the courthouse would turn into an encounter that would ripple through their community and eventually make national headlines. As he navigated the familiar streets, blue and red lights suddenly flashed in his rearview mirror. The judge, always a law-abiding citizen, carefully pulled over, puzzled about what violation he might have committed. The police officer approached, his hand resting cautiously on his holster, a gesture that spoke volumes about preconceptions and fear. Despite wearing an impeccable tailored suit and displaying his judicial credentials, the judge found himself being questioned with unwarranted suspicion. The officer's tone grew increasingly confrontational, despite the judge's calm and professional responses. What happened next would challenge everything both men thought they knew about each other. The judge, drawing from decades of experience in the justice system, recognized a pivotal moment when he saw one. Instead of reacting with justified anger, he made a decision that would alter both their perspectives forever. Witnesses began gathering on the sidewalk, phones recording what they believed would be another tragic example of racial profiling. But they were about to witness something entirely unexpected. The interaction between these two men, one representing law enforcement and the other the justice system, was about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. As tension mounted on that suburban street, the true weight of the moment became clear. This wasn't just about a traffic stop anymore. It had evolved into a powerful intersection of privilege, prejudice, and the possibility of change. The judge's next words would not only diffuse the situation but would set in motion a chain of events that would impact police training programs across the country. In an era where stories of confrontations between law enforcement and African American citizens often end in tragedy, this encounter was about to break the mold. The judge's measured response, born from years of handling high-stakes situations in his courtroom, would demonstrate how wisdom and dignity can triumph over bias and misunderstanding. But before anyone could process what was unfolding, something happened that left everyone speechless. The officer's hand slowly moved away from his holster, and his stern expression began to change. What followed would become a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of overcoming deeply ingrained prejudices through understanding and respect. As news helicopters circled overhead and social media buzzed with partially informed takes on the situation, neither man realized they were about to become symbols of hope in a nation desperate for signs of positive change. Their story would soon reach millions, challenging assumptions and proving that even in the most tense situations, humanity can prevail. What happened next would not only change both their lives but would also spark a movement in police departments nationwide. But before we reveal the extraordinary conclusion to this encounter, let's delve deeper into the backgrounds of these two men whose paths crossed on that fateful morning and understand how their individual journeys led them to this defining moment that would leave an indelible mark on their community and the nation. Stay tuned as we uncover the remarkable events that followed and witness how one traffic stop transformed from a potential tragedy into an inspiring story of understanding, growth, and unexpected friendship that continues to impact lives today. Before that tense morning, the judge had spent decades building a reputation for fairness and integrity in the courtroom. Growing up in a working-class family in the South, he had witnessed both progress and persistent inequality. His parents, a schoolteacher and a postal worker, had instilled in him an unwavering belief in education and justice. Through scholarships and determination, he graduated at the top of his law school class, eventually rising to become one of the most respected federal judges in the country. That morning, he had been preparing for a landmark case involving civil rights, a cruel irony given what was about to unfold. His briefcase held documents that could reshape legal precedents, but at that moment, none of his accomplishments seemed to matter. As he sat in his car, hands visible on the steering wheel as trained professionals always advised, he couldn't help but think of the conversations he'd had with his teenage son about interactions with law enforcement. The officer who pulled him over had his own story. A decorated veteran with 12 years on the force, he joined the police department with genuine intentions to serve and protect. His record showed both commendations for community service and concerning patterns in his traffic stops. What many didn't know was that he'd recently begun questioning his own unconscious biases after a department-mandated training session. But old habits and ingrained perceptions died hard. The gathering crowd included Sarah Chin, a local high school teacher who was jogging past. She'd later tell reporters that the atmosphere was electric with tension. You could feel everyone holding their breath. She would say in subsequent interviews, "We'd all seen similar situations end badly, but something felt different about this one." Among the onlookers was also a retired police sergeant who recognized both men, the judge from his frequent appearances in the media and the officer from joint training sessions. He watched intently, understanding better than most the complex dynamics at play. The way both men carried themselves, their body language, and their careful choice of words would later become a case study in de-escalation techniques. The judge's calm demeanor masked a storm of emotions. Years of practicing law had taught him that moments like these were crossroads, opportunities for either conflict or connection. As he reached for his credentials, he noticed the officer's name tag and remembered a case from several years ago. The connection he was about to make would shock everyone present. Meanwhile, the officer's dashboard camera captured every moment, its unblinking eye recording what would soon become viral footage. But unlike many police videos that circulated on social media, this one would tell a very different story. The next few minutes would demonstrate how split-second decisions can either escalate tensions or create opportunities for understanding. Local residents continued to gather, drawn by the growing number of spectators. Among them was a youth pastor who had worked with both the police department and community leaders on bridge-building initiatives. He began quietly filming, sensing that this interaction might become a powerful teaching moment for his work in conflict resolution. The silence was broken only by the crackle of the police radio and the distant wail of approaching sirens, backup responding to a situation that was about to take an unexpected turn. The judge's next words would pierce through years of misunderstanding and prejudice. But first, he had to make a decision that would put everything he believed about justice and human dignity to the test. As tension mounted, a young intern from the courthouse drove past, recognizing her mentor in what appeared to be a precarious situation. She quickly pulled over, adding another layer to the unfolding drama. What she was about to witness would fundamentally change her perspective on the justice system she was preparing to enter. The tension reached its peak as the judge slowly reached into his jacket pocket, causing the officer to tighten his grip on his holster. But instead of pulling out just his ID, the judge retrieved an old, worn photograph that would change everything. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment he knew was about to unfold. "Officer Thompson," the judge said calmly, using the name he'd read on the badge. "Before you run my license, I'd like you to look at something." The crowd held its collective breath. Some raised their phones higher, expecting the worst but hoping for something different. The morning sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as time seemed to stand still. The photograph in the judge's hand was from 15 years ago, taken at a community center that had long since been demolished. It showed a group of young men in basketball jerseys, and among them was a younger version of Officer Thompson himself, alongside the judge's younger brother. The connection was about to emerge, but the officer hadn't recognized it yet. The judge's voice remained steady as he began to speak about that community center, where he had volunteered as a youth mentor while attending law school. He described a particular teenager who had impressed him with his leadership skills and determination to make a difference in his community. That teenager, now standing beside his car with his hand on his weapon, was Officer Thompson. The officer's expression began to shift as fragments of memory stirred. The community center, the basketball tournaments, the law student who had helped him with his college applications. But the full realization hadn't hit him yet. The growing crowd of onlookers, now including several local business owners opening their shops, watched as years of history and connection began to surface. Sarah Chin, the teacher who had been recording, later described the change in atmosphere as like watching a storm cloud slowly give way to sunlight. The air was still charged with tension, but something else was emerging. a sense that they were witnessing a moment of profound significance. The judge continued speaking, his words carrying across the now silent street. He talked about watching young Thompson grow from a teenager determined to escape the cycle of poverty into a young man with purpose. What the officer didn't know was that the judge had followed his career from afar, including his decision to join the police force. The dashboard camera continued recording as the officer's hand slowly moved away from his holster. His stern expression began to crack as recognition dawned in his eyes. The memory of that mentor from his youth, the man who had believed in him when few others did, was suddenly standing before him, not just as a black man in an expensive car, but as someone who had helped shape his life's path. But before the full recognition could settle in, before either man could fully process the incredible coincidence of their reunion, a police backup unit arrived with sirens blaring. The sudden intrusion of noise and new officers on the scene threatened to shatter the delicate moment of connection that was forming. The crowd tensed again as more officers approached, unaware of the profound revelation unfolding before them. Officer Thompson now stood at a crossroads, between his training and his humanity, between past and present, between fear and understanding. His next action would determine not just the outcome of this traffic stop, but potentially the future of police-community relations in their city. The judge, still holding the photograph, watched as Officer Thompson turned to face his approaching colleagues. The next few moments would either validate or destroy everything both men had worked for throughout their lives. The entire crowd, phones still recording, waited to see how this extraordinary situation would unfold. As Officer Thompson turned to face his approaching colleagues, another vehicle suddenly pulled up to the scene. A sleek black SUV with federal government plates. The crowd murmured as two FBI agents stepped out, their presence adding an unexpected layer of complexity to the already tense situation. What no one knew was that these agents had been tracking a series of threatening letters sent to federal judges in the district, including several directed at our judge. The FBI agents, initially drawn by the gathering crowd and police presence around a federal judge's vehicle, quickly assessed the scene. The lead agent recognized the judge immediately. They had met just yesterday to discuss the ongoing investigation into the threats. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic, as the judge was scheduled to deliver a controversial ruling later that afternoon. Officer Thompson found himself caught in an extraordinary moment. The photograph in his hand, the approaching backup officers, and now federal agents converging on what had started as a routine traffic stop. His training told him to maintain control of the situation, but his awakening recognition of the judge as his former mentor pulled him in another direction. The crowd's attention shifted as one of the FBI agents approached, her hand raised in a gesture of authority. But before she could speak, a local news van screeched to a halt nearby. The story was about to take on yet another dimension, one that would force both the judge and Officer Thompson to confront not just their shared past, but a present danger neither had anticipated. The judge's judicial clerk, who had been frantically trying to reach him about an urgent development in the threatening letters case, finally broke through the growing crowd. She carried a manila envelope that had arrived at the courthouse just minutes earlier, marked with the same distinctive handwriting as the previous threats. The FBI agent's presence suddenly made perfect sense to those close enough to observe the unfolding scene. Officer Thompson, still processing the revelation about his former mentor, now found himself in position to potentially protect the very man he had just stopped under questionable circumstances. That irony wasn't lost on the gathering crowd, who continued recording every moment of this increasingly complex situation. The local news crew, sensing they had stumbled upon something much bigger than a routine traffic stop, began setting up their equipment. The judge's calm demeanor showed the first signs of strain as he recognized the envelope in his clerk's hands. He knew its contents might force him to recuse himself from the landmark civil rights case he was presiding over, the very case that had made him a target. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, as personal history, professional duty, and public safety collided on that suburban street. Sarah Chin, still recording, noticed something that others had missed. A suspicious vehicle had circled the block 3 times since the FBI arrived. She tried to signal Officer Thompson, but the crowd's murmuring had grown too loud. The next few moments would require split-second decisions from everyone involved, as past and present, law enforcement and judiciary, personal relationships, and professional duties all converged. The judge's security detail, finally alerted to the situation, was en route, but they were still precious minutes away. Officer Thompson stood at the center of it all, the photograph in one hand, his radio in the other, as he realized that this traffic stop might have inadvertently intercepted something far more sinister. His next decision would need to balance protocol, protection, and the profound personal revelation he'd just experienced. The FBI agents, noting the same suspicious vehicle Sarah had spotted, began discreetly positioning themselves around the judge's car. The backup officers, still unaware of the full situation, waited for direction from Officer Thompson. The news crew's camera lights illuminated the scene as the morning sun disappeared behind gathering storm clouds, providing an ominous backdrop to the unfolding drama. The judge, looking at Officer Thompson, saw not just his former mentee but perhaps his only ally in what was becoming an increasingly dangerous situation. As thunder rumbled in the distance, both men realized that their unexpected reunion might have been more than just coincidence. It might have been destiny. The suspicious vehicle suddenly accelerated toward the gathered crowd, its engine roaring through the quiet morning air. In that split second, Officer Thompson's years of training merged with his personal connection to the judge. Without hesitation, he pushed his former mentor toward safety while signaling to his fellow officers. The FBI agents, already alert, sprang into action as the vehicle screeched to a halt. What emerged from the car stunned everyone. Not a threatening figure, but a frightened court stenographer who had worked with the judge for years. She stumbled out, clutching a stack of documents, her face streaked with tears. "They tried to make me plant false evidence," she gasped, revealing a conspiracy that went far beyond threatening letters. The documents she carried exposed a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of the local government. Officer Thompson, still holding the old photograph, made a crucial decision. He ordered his backup officers to secure the area while he personally ensured the safety of both the judge and the stenographer. The FBI agents quickly gathered the documents, realizing they had stumbled upon evidence that would crack open multiple ongoing investigations. The news crew captured the moment when Officer Thompson and the judge worked side by side. Their earlier confrontation transformed into a partnership that would reshape their community. The threatening letters, it turned out, had been a smokescreen for a larger plot to intimidate judges handling corruption cases across the district. Sarah Chen's video of the traffic stop had already gone viral, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Instead of documenting another tragic encounter, her footage showed something remarkable: how two men, despite their initial confrontation, drew upon their shared history to protect justice itself. The recording captured Officer Thompson's split-second transition from potential antagonist to protective ally, a moment that would later be used in police training programs nationwide. The judge's scheduled ruling, it was revealed, would have exposed a decades-old system of corruption. The traffic stop, which had seemed like racial profiling, had actually disrupted an attempt to prevent him from reaching the courthouse that morning. The conspirators hadn't counted on the officer being someone whose life had been touched by the judge years ago. As federal agents led away several previously respected community figures in handcuffs, Officer Thompson and the judge stood together, the old photograph still between them. The crowd that had gathered expecting tragedy instead witnessed redemption. The judge turned to Officer Thompson and said something that made both men smile. A private moment of recognition caught on dozens of cameras but understood only by them. But the most powerful revelation came from an unexpected source. The youth pastor who had been recording revealed that he was wearing a wire as part of a long-term FBI investigation into corruption. His presence that morning wasn't coincidence. He had been tracking the conspirators and chose that moment to blow his cover to protect both the judge and Officer Thompson. The gathering storm finally broke, rain falling on the assembled crowd. Yet nobody moved. They stood witnessing the embrace between Officer Thompson and his former mentor, now his partner in exposing corruption. The image would become symbolic of how personal connections can transform seemingly hopeless situations into opportunities for justice and understanding. Local residents who had come expecting to protest police misconduct instead found themselves part of a larger story about healing, justice, and the unexpected ways our past connections shape our present choices. The judge's clerk, who had been so frantically trying to reach him, smiled as she realized that what could have been a tragic confrontation had instead become a moment of triumph for both law enforcement and the justice system. As the rain continued to fall, Officer Thompson and the judge walked together toward the courthouse, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The old photograph, now safely tucked away, had bridged the gap between past and present, transforming a potential tragedy into a powerful story of redemption, justice, and the enduring impact of mentorship. In the weeks that followed, the impact of that rainy morning reverberated throughout the community and beyond. The judge did deliver his ruling, exposing decades of corruption, but the story that captured national attention wasn't just about the crime ring they'd uncovered. Instead, people were captivated by how a seemingly routine traffic stop had transformed into a moment of profound connection and justice. Officer Thompson's body camera footage, combined with Sarah Chen's viral video, became required viewing at police academies across the country, but not as an example of what goes wrong, rather as a powerful demonstration of how personal connections and shared humanity can overcome ingrained biases and assumptions. The moment when Thompson recognized his former mentor became a teaching point about seeing beyond initial perceptions. The community center where their paths had first crossed 15 years ago was rebuilt, funded partly by donations that poured in after their story went national. Officer Thompson and the judge now serve on its board of directors, working together to create mentorship programs that connect law enforcement officers with local youth. The basketball court where they once played now hosts regular games between police officers and community members. The stenographer's courage in coming forward inspired others to speak up. A dozen more cases of corruption were exposed, leading to significant reforms in the local justice system. She now travels the country speaking about integrity in the justice system, often sharing the stage with the judge and Officer Thompson. Their story became a beacon of hope for those working to bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities of color. The youth pastor's role in the investigation earned him not just commendations, but the trust of both law enforcement and community leaders. His church became a neutral ground where difficult conversations about police reform and community relations could take place honestly and productively. The threatening letters that had initially drawn FBI attention were traced back to the corrupt officials, adding years to their eventual sentences. Sarah Chen's video coverage earned her a journalism award, but she chose to remain a teacher, understanding that her greatest impact would be helping young people learn to see beyond their preconceptions. She often invites both the judge and Officer Thompson to speak to her classes about that transformative morning and the power of recognizing humanity in others. The old photograph that sparked the recognition now hangs in the rebuilt community center's entrance hall. Beneath it, a simple plaque reads, "Sometimes the biggest distances are bridged by the smallest memories." It serves as a daily reminder to everyone who enters that connection and understanding can emerge in the most unexpected moments. 1 year later, Officer Thompson received a promotion to lead a new community relations unit, while the judge continued his work on the federal bench. But perhaps their greatest achievement was the creation of a mentorship program that pairs veteran judges with young police officers, building bridges of understanding before conflicts can arise. The judge's landmark ruling eventually led to systematic changes in how corruption cases are handled nationwide. But when asked about his legacy, he always points to that rainy morning and the former mentee who chose to see beyond the badge and the bench to recognize their shared humanity. As our story concludes, it's worth noting that the most powerful changes often begin with simple moments of recognition. A worn photograph, a shared memory, a split-second decision to trust rather than fear. These small choices can ripple outward, transforming not just individual lives but entire communities. The judge and Officer Thompson still meet regularly at the community center, shooting baskets with local kids and sharing their story. But more importantly, they're writing a new story, one where understanding bridges divides, where past connections shape future choices, and where justice is served not just in courtrooms, but in everyday moments of human connection.